The wing part suspected of belonging to that missing Malaysian Airlines jet is now in a lab for analysis.
On the night of March 8, 2014, a Boeing 777 disappeared. Gone. No trace. For a decade, theories swirled. Families mourned. The world scratched its head. Then a name emerged. Richard Godfrey, a retired engineer, a lone wolf. He claimed to know the truth. He said he found MH370 and he had proof, but what did he find? And why are some calling it impossible? Let's dive in. The mystery that gripped the world. MH370. The name echoes with unanswered questions. A routine flight, vanished without a trace. It's a modern ghost story, but the real story is far more complex than most realize. Let's set the scene. March 8, 2014, Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, midnight. Flight MH370, a Boeing 777 bound for Beijing. 239 souls on board. Takeoff was normal. Initial flight, routine, standard comms, nothing amiss. Then, silence. The last words, 19. Yes, good night Malaysian 370. 2 minutes later, darkness. The transponder gone. The plane vanished from civilian radar. But here's the twist, it didn't vanish completely, not yet. Malaysia's military radar, a different system, kept tracking something, an unidentified blip. Investigators believe it was MH370, but it wasn't heading to Beijing. It was turning, sharply, deliberately, west, back across the Malay Peninsula, out over the Andaman Sea. Military radar tracked it for another hour. 2:22 a.m., gone. Imagine that room, watching a passenger jet just disappear. No distress, no explanation, just gone. Then another twist. The plane wasn't talking to air traffic control, but it was still pinging a satellite. The satellite data unit, connected to an Inmarsat satellite over the Indian Ocean. Maintenance handshakes. Yep, still here. These pings, ghostly signals, became the only evidence for 6 hours. 7 pings in total. Investigators clung to them. Using burst timing offset and burst frequency offset, they tried to map the flight. They got arcs, giant, sweeping arcs. One pointed north, ruled out. Too much radar, too many eyes. The other, south, into the vastness of the Indian Ocean, the 7th arc, the final handshake. 819 MH370 out of fuel, drifting down somewhere along that curve. The biggest, most expensive search in aviation history began. Ships, planes, drones. 120,000 square kilometers of seabed scanned. Years, hundreds of millions of dollars. And the result? Nothing. Well, not entirely nothing. Debris washed ashore, a wing flap, interior paneling, more bits and pieces, but no smoking gun, no black box, no real answers. The search hit a wall. The Inmarsat data, so promising, led to nothing. Something didn't add up. In the void, theories exploded. Wild, chilling theories, but one name stood out, Richard Godfrey. He claimed to know where MH370 was, and he said he had proof. The official story, too simple. Here's the problem. The official explanation felt too neat. In the years after the disappearance, investigators focused on one scenario. Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah, the pilot, hijacked his own plane, switched off comms, made a U-turn, depressurized the cabin, flew south for 7 hours, crashed into the Indian Ocean. A chilling story, Hollywood-worthy. But when you look closely, the theory falls apart. The satellite data, the backbone of the official story. Messy, the last data point around 8:19 a.m. Something strange. The burst frequency offset, not a gentle glide, a sharp drop in altitude. A sudden acceleration, a nosedive. The Australian Transport Safety Bureau suggested a descent rate of 15,000 feet per minute. That's not controlled, that's falling. The pilot self-harm theory becomes shaky. Then there's the wreckage, or lack thereof. The flaperon found on Reunion Island. Shredded. Experts said it looked like flutter damage. High-speed air. Violent shaking. The flaps were retracted. Cruise configuration. Not landing. A wing flap section in Tanzania showed fracture from overload, a violent high-energy impact, not a calm landing. The fragments show brute force destruction. The biggest flaw? The search itself, built on assumptions. The satellite pings were precise. The fuel burn was accurate. Autopilot kept the jet straight. The seventh arc was gospel. Assumptions are dangerous. Years went by, nothing found. They were looking in the wrong place. Confirmation bias, twisting evidence to fit a theory. The pilot self-harm story was convenient, but the evidence was contradictory. So where does that leave us? By 2017, the official search was suspended. Frustration, anger, desperation, families with no answers, experts baffled, the public unconvinced. If the pilot theory was wrong, then what happened? Was the satellite data misread? Did the wreckage point to a different crash, or was there another method? An overlooked technology? Could something track MH370 more accurately? That's where Richard Godfrey enters. He took a different approach. While others stared at satellite pings, Godfrey asked a different question, and his answer shook everything. Richard Godfrey's crazy idea. Years after everyone gave up, one man quietly was asking, what if a missing plane could be tracked? By amateur radio hobbyists? Richard Godfrey, a retired aerospace engineer, wasn't satisfied. He dug into a technology almost nobody knew about. WSPR. Weak Signal Propagation Reporter, a system invented in the 2000s. Amateur radio enthusiasts send out tiny radio signals, ridiculously weak signals. But they can bounce off the ionosphere, travel thousands of miles. Think of WSPR like a giant spiderweb around the globe, each thread a weak signal. Godfrey realized if a huge plane slices through a thread, it leaves a disturbance, a tiny dip in signal strength, a little shift in frequency. Logged in an online database, WSPRnet. Years of data, billions of tweets from radios. If MH370 flew across the Indian Ocean, it crossed dozens of threads. Find the disturbances, map the path. A trail of breadcrumbs. He rolled up his sleeves. For 3 years, he combed through the WSPRnet archive. 200 billion lines of raw data. He built custom software, filtered out false alarms. Slowly, a picture formed. On the night of March 7th, 2014, Godfrey found 130 WSPR anomalies over the Indian Ocean. Not random noise, not weather, not interference. Plotted on a map, they lined up a track, beginning where military radar last saw the plane, curving southwest, then south, exactly the turn investigators suspected. But with more precision, the trail didn't fade. It ended at a specific spot, 128 degrees south, 99.934 degrees east, 500 kilometers west of Perth, Australia. Deep water, inside an area never searched. For the first time in years, a data-driven location for MH370, not a vague guess. A single point, backed by numbers. Numbers aren't enough. Richard Godfrey's work had to withstand hard questions and scrutiny. The real test, whether the patterns could stand up to hard questions from people who didn't care about theories. They wanted proof. That's why he took his findings to the University of Liverpool, the same experts who helped track down Air France Flight 447. If Godfrey's numbers were smoke and mirrors, they'd know instantly. The puzzle pieces. The first piece, the timestamp cross-check. Did the WSPR disturbances match the timeline of MH370's flight? If the radio blips happened hours before or after the pings, the theory collapses. But every one of the 130 anomalies lined up almost perfectly. Within 4 minutes of an Inmarsat ping. That's not coincidence, that's a pattern. No other plane in that sky. No other plane made those ripples. The only candidate, MH370. Next, the signal geometry. A sharper photograph. Inmarsat's data, a rough sketch. Giant arcs. WSPR changed the game. Each signal traveled along a specific path between 2 radio operators. Disturbance locked to that path, crossed them like lines on a map. Instead of a continent-sized search area, Godfrey drew corridors only 20 kilometers wide. The more paths, the more precise the trail. Then came the trickiest test, the refraction fingerprint, proving the wiggles weren't just random noise. The ocean, the ionosphere, solar activity, all could bend radio waves. Godfrey needed to show it was the fingerprint of a Boeing 777. He focused on signals in the 14 megahertz range. Predictable reaction when something massive cuts across it. Software threw out faint disturbances. Only strong hits made the cut. 130 solid anomalies, clustered, forming a line across the Indian Ocean. The Liverpool team ran the numbers. Bayesian analysis. The same method that nailed down Air France 447. 74% probability that MH370's wreckage was sitting inside a small patch of ocean centered on Godfrey's coordinates. For the first time, the data wasn't just hopeful, it was mathematically solid. Imagine being one of those scientists. You've spent years watching wild theories pop up and burn out. Stolen planes, secret bases, pilot self-harm, and then someone hands you data points that line up almost too neatly to ignore. It wasn't absolute proof, but it was the closest thing anyone had seen since the plane disappeared. The pushback against WSPR. People push back against any bold new idea. That's how science works. With something as haunting as MH370, the skepticism was instant and loud. Objection 1. WSPR was never designed for this purpose. True, WSPR was for ham radio hobbyists, but science is full of tools being used in ways the inventors never dreamed of. X-rays, penicillin, GPS. The physics behind WSPR, the way radio waves bend, is solid science. Even Joe Taylor, the Nobel Prize winner who invented WSPR, admitted that airplanes can disturb these signals. Godfrey went for a real-world test. His team chartered a Boeing 777, flew it along the suspected MH370 route. The USPR stations were listening. The disturbances popped up exactly where the plane was. Proof that this wasn't just math on a napkin. The system worked. The system worked. Objection 2. He keeps moving the target. His first calculations pointed to 33 degrees south, then 34, then 29. Critics pounced. But in science, changing your answer as you get better data is progress. Godfrey didn't just throw darts. Each shift happened because more WSPR data came online. The algorithms got smarter. The area of uncertainty shrank. For over 14 months, the target hasn't budged from 29 degrees south. The refinements are over. The model has stopped drifting. Objection 3. We still haven't found wreckage at that exact spot. Fair point. Until someone pulls something off the seabed, it's still theory. Let's start with the debris we already have. The flaperon on Reunion Island, confirmed to be from MH370, more debris in Mozambique, Madagascar, Tanzania. Where did they come from? Oceanographers stepped in. Geomar Helmholtz Center for Ocean Research in Germany, massive drift simulations, virtual message-in-a-bottle trackers. They reversed the drift paths, the majority traced back to an origin point within 100 kilometers of Godfrey's hotspot at 29 degrees south. A specific zone, WSPR wasn't meant for this, but the physics is valid. The crash site moved, but the data got better. No wreckage is there, but drift analysis points to the location. Every time an objection is raised, the evidence pushes back harder. For the first time in years, there's action. Ocean Infinity led the 2018 search effort. Their flagship is the Armada 7806, packed with Hugin autonomous underwater vehicles, robotic submarines. They can dive 6,000 meters and scan the ocean floor. Malaysia's government has signed a new contract with Ocean Infinity. The search zone, 15,000 square kilometers, zeroed in on the hotspot identified by the WSPR analysis. No find, no fee. Ocean Infinity pays all the upfront costs. They only get paid if they find the wreck. They wouldn't gamble that kind of money unless they believed the data was strong. A single Hugin AUV can cover 500 square kilometers a day. They can sweep the entire search box in about 1 month. More than a decade of frustration, and the answer might be less than 30 days away. The ship is loaded, the robots are ready, the contract is signed. All that's left is for the weather to cooperate. After years of heartbreak, wild theories, false leads, and endless speculation, the pieces are finally lining up. Solid data, a defined target, and the tech to get the job done. The question is no longer, can MH370 be found? The question now is, are we finally about to close the book on one of the greatest mysteries of our time?